I've always tried to get it across to sort of you and sort of other people who maybe don't really understand Brexit, or I've got a lot of sort of Europeans and Americans and Canadians and all sorts of people from over the world watch my channel, which fascinates me every day. But a lot of them, and it's not that they don't follow Brexit, it's that if you lived here during 2016 and you saw what was going on, you knew. And one of the things I always try to make clear is Brexit was malleable. Brexit at the time in 2016 could mean whatever you wanted. Brexit at one point could be about trade. It could be about sovereignty. It could be about immigration. It could be about just, spitting in David Cameron's eye. To a lot of people, Brexit just meant, well, everything. And this is why we've always made it very, very clear that if you look at the 2016 Brexit campaign yourself, it was wide. It was wide. They were trying to get as many people as they could, and they didn't really care specifically about one thing. That's why we always said Brexit never had a plan. And of course, we always knew it was going to damage trade. And at the end of the day, if you're damaging trade, that means UK businesses are going to suffer. That means, HMRC is taking sort of less tax revenue in from businesses, importing, exporting, you name it. Less money is coming to the economy, into the economy. It damages it as a whole. And of course, Brexit being about trade is always about, trade until you actually start to talk about these types of stories that actually it's not helping businesses. And if anything, it is hurting them so much more. And we always said it would be the small businesses, the SMEs, who had to struggle with this because they just simply don't have capacity. I always said I had a friend, although he's moved now, but the company he worked at, when they were sort of, sending stuff to the EU, morning after, he then actually had to start doing 2 extra hours of work added to his day to sort out all this, exporting stuff of when they were making stuff. And that was fine if your company can handle that. If not, you've got to hire experts. The paperwork itself costs money. And that's what a lot of people just didn't seem to understand, how much extra money these companies are now actually having to spend on exporting and importing stuff. And companies are going to suffer because it's only really the big internationals who can really solve this, or really big, large companies. Everybody else, well, it doesn't matter. And as always, Brexit is about trade until you start talking about these problems. So let's start talking about these problems, shall we? So, as always, before we do get into this, please do remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. And of course, down below, there is the YouTube thank you button. And of course, the YouTube subscription, where you can join the Pony Club. And you get badges, emojis, and whatnot, and all sorts of stuff you get when you subscribe to that. So, as always, thank you very much to everyone who does help and support the channel, even if you do just hit the like and share button. So, let's get on with this today. So, this comes from the New European with some very, very dire news about Brexit trade, because this isn't good at all. So, the title is, yes, a third of UK exporters to the EU really have given up over Brexit. Last week, as the country was still focused on the death of the Queen, news reporting seemed to be at a standstill. But news remained, just slipped out unnoticed. And this would have been a boon for the Brexiteers, because Project Fear is the gift that keeps on giving. The latest prediction of the doomsters that they got right about a hard Brexit was that it would harm UK trade. And in the midst of a mourning period, a slew of reports appeared, pointing out that 33% of British exporters had given up the ghost and stopped exporting to the European Union. Yet another consequence of the bombastic and thoughtless way the rupture with the EU was done. And according to the HMRC data, the number of UK businesses exporting goods to the EU fell to 18,000 in just 2021, the first year after the Brexit transition period ended, from 27,000 in 2022. The main reason is red tape. Michael Dale, the senior manager at the accountancy firm UHY, the Hacker and Hacker Young, told me that basically pre-Brexit, goods used to move freely between the UK and the EU. That's obviously stopped. Now there are export barriers and import barriers, export declarations, importer formalities, import VAT, which has remained but needs to be applied for. It has all had a massive impact on these companies' sales, and there has been significant drops. The figures may not be confused with the value of exports, which has also suffered but had its own trajectory. For instance, UK export figures for this year will include the positive effect of trade with Ukraine to replace weapons and other goods related to Russia's invasion. What Dale is describing is the growing number of UK companies' reluctance or just inability to export, something which was a feature of the pre-EU times. Pardon me. A former head of the British Fashion Council told me, try as they might, they have struggled to persuade brands to export in the years before the UK joined the European Economic Community in 1973 because they felt the paperwork and bureaucracy made it not worth the bother. This changed after the ascension when Europe effectively became a home market for the UK. Now it is the other way around. As Adam Posden and Lucas Ruffalo-Klinger put it, in The Economics of Brexit, What Have We Learned, a new ebook published by Vox EU, Centre for Economic Policy Research and UK Changing Europe, said it this: Brexit means that the UK has declared a trade war on itself. Today, there might be no tariffs on goods moving between the UK and the EU, but the problem is about non-tariff barriers, the extra bureaucracy, which also causes expensive delays in deliveries as goods and paperwork are checked. It is too much for many small businesses, which do not have the extra staff and work, as we pointed out before earlier. These smaller businesses will also struggle to afford the advice that might have helped them to streamline the process or even find workarounds to make things easier, such as registering their business in the Netherlands, although that can also be complex and expensive. So, as you can see, there are answers to this, but the problem is it all costs money and it all brings with its own complexities and expenses. So, this is just one more thing that they are trying to deal with. And this is going to be and continue to have a massive, massive effect on our trade for years to come. And anyone who is sort of still convinced that Brexit wasn't about trade, well, we've got hundreds of thousands of sound bites, newspaper interviews of Brexiteers telling us that Brexit was all about trade, that this would make trade so much better, that we'll become, fantastic. But as you can see, the more and more numbers we get, the less it is. And there will always be someone in chat who will go, oh, but what about all these other fantastic trade deals that we've done? It doesn't matter, because you've still got to carry out all that bureaucracy, all that paperwork. And look, sending something from point A to point B, the longer the distance, the more the expense. It is far cheaper to send something to, I don't know, to Paris than it is to Sydney in Australia. That's just the facts, and yet, as we've always said and maintained, Brexiteers just do not understand trade. So, as always, not good times ahead at all for many of our UK businesses, because what does this mean? Well, that now means, as we've said, every single time we've covered this, we've had businesses lose 30, 40, or just stop exporting altogether. How much money is that lost to a business that they can no longer do that? could be tens, if not thousands of pounds. And to a small business, that can sometimes be a heck of a lot of money. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, we'll see you all next time.